Hi everyone, my name is Megan Meldrum. I'm the planner on this planning application and the Housing Initiative Coordinator with the Municipality of the County of Kings. This is a recorded presentation for the purpose of a public information meeting for a land use bylaw text amendment. This is a council-initiated application to amend the text of the land use bylaw to permit up to 2 secondary suites in the residential 1-unit R1 zone and to amend the definition of a secondary suite. The agenda for the public information meeting was as follows. We had a welcome and an introduction from Councillor Lutz, who was chairing the meeting. We had presentations from myself, followed by a question and comment period. And we wrapped things up with a conclusion and adjournment from Councillor Lutz. The purpose of the public information meeting is to inform the public of the planning application at hand, as well as explain the planning policies that enable the application to occur, and to receive feedback from the public. Staff would also answer any questions presented by members of the public. It's important to note that at this point in time in the application process, being the public information meeting, that no formal staff opinion or decision has been made on these applications, and that at the time of the public information meeting that no decisions would be made either. Before I began my presentation at the public information meeting, I reiterated that as municipal staff, we really value open communication and encourage respectful discussion, and that the municipality is committed to providing a safe and respectful space for staff and all attendees, and that any abusive action or language would not be tolerated, and if taken, it may have resulted in the termination of the meeting in order to protect the well-being of all involved. Because this application proposes an amendment to the land use bylaw text, I thought it would be beneficial to walk us through the planning framework and review process for these types of planning applications. So the first step of the review process is to receive a complete application, which we have. The second step is to organize and hold a public information meeting. And this recording is a recording of such presentation. The third step is a staff review, where staff will review in detail the application and its proposal, consult with internal and external departments if required, and prepare a staff report for the municipality's Planning Advisory Committee, often referred to as PAC. This meeting would typically be the one that's following the public information meeting in the larger schedule. So this would fall on May 22nd. The application and report will then be presented to the Planning Advisory Committee. The committee will decide whether to make a positive or negative recommendation to council, and regardless of the type of recommendation, either positive or negative, given to council, the application will proceed to a first reading. At the first reading, council will decide whether to forward the application to a public hearing. The public hearing would be advertised on our social media page and the municipal website. It would be held in the council chambers and is open to the public. So presents another opportunity for members of the public to come in, share their comments, or ask questions. Following this public hearing, the council will give the application a second reading, and council will then at this time form a decision on the application to either refuse the application or approve it. And this decision, either refusal or approval, would also be advertised on our website. If the decision is one of approval, a 14-day appeal period will begin. And during this window of time, the decision of council could be appealed to the Nova Scotia Regulatory and Appeals Board. This is the independent tribunal and regulatory arm of the government of Nova Scotia. If no appeals are submitted during this time, the proposed amendment would be considered in full force and effect. So there's no specific address associated with the amendment, and this proposed amendment would affect every property in the residential 1-unit R1 zone in the municipality, which are located in growth centers across the entirety of the municipality. As we are discussing a bylaw text amendment, I'll provide a quick overview of the municipality's primary planning documents. So the municipality relies on two key planning documents, first being the municipal planning strategy, and the second, the land use bylaw. The municipal planning strategy, often referred to as the MPS, is our main planning document. It outlines the municipality's approach to land use planning and includes secondary plans. It provides high-level planning objectives. The land use bylaw, or the LUB, is really the tool and document that implements the MPS. It governs things like the built form and land uses through specific rules, like building setbacks, heights, and specifically what types of land uses are permitted or not in particular zones. Together, these documents establish different zones across the municipality, with each zone having its own set of requirements detailed in the land use bylaw. This application to amend the land use bylaw is referred to as a council-initiated amendment, as it was not prompted or applied for by a member of the public. Council directed the Chief Administrative Officer to direct planning staff to undertake the amendment. The intent of this amendment is to ensure that the municipality continues to receive funding from the federal government for improving housing accessibility and affordability. For context, in spring 2024, it was announced that the municipality would be the recipient of funding totaling $5.9 million over the span of 3 years for housing starts through CMHC's Housing Accelerator Fund, often referred to as HAF. CMHC is Canada's national housing agency. It's a federal crown corporation that has a focus on improving housing conditions and making housing more accessible and affordable for people living in Canada. One of the requirements to keep the funding commits the municipality to make amendments to its planning documents to allow for 4 units as of right in all residential zoned lots. Currently, the R1 zone permits 3 units as of right. And please keep in mind that residential zones are only permitted in growth centers across the municipality. This means if a person owns a property zoned residential, they would be able to build at least 4 units without having to apply and pay for additional planning applications. This amendment builds upon recent efforts to increase housing in our growth centers, as currently the bylaw permits up to 4 units and more in all residential zones, but the R1 zone, in addition to the C3 zone, mixed commercial residential. Staff are looking for avenues to comply with CMHC's funding requirements to continue to receive funding. And so staff are exploring amendments that would result in all residential zones permitting 4 units. And the only zone that doesn't permit this is the R1 zone currently. So one avenue is to increase the number of secondary suites permitted in the R1 zone from 1 to 2. Currently in R1 zone lands, a single primary dwelling, 1 secondary suite, and 1 detached accessory dwelling unit, or ADU, is permitted. Under section 4.3.4.1 of the land use bylaw, a secondary suite within a 1-unit dwelling is permitted subject to conditions, and these conditions speak to the location of an exterior entrance to the unit and that the exterior of the 1-unit dwelling needs to be compatible with the existing style and building materials of others in the area. This option and proposed amendment, being the increase of permitted number of secondary suites from 1 to 2, would then trigger a required change in the definition of a secondary suite, which is found in the definition section of the land use bylaw. The municipality currently uses the National Building Code's definition of secondary suite which restricts each residential dwelling to a single secondary suite. This definition would not be consistent with enabling 4 residential units per lot for the municipality. To ensure consistency and compliance, the municipality's definition of a secondary suite would have to be revised to reflect the allowance of 2 secondary suites. For more information, a secondary suite is a self-contained residential unit within a dwelling that contains an existing primary residence. So it may include shared spaces such as storage areas, service rooms, or laundry facilities. These units can be created within an existing home through renovations and may be located on the same level, above or below the primary dwelling. So staff are considering using increasing secondary suites in the R1 zone to meet funding requirements for a few reasons. Secondary suites are seen as an effective tool for increasing units on a property to increase overall housing supply in a way that maintains the visual character of existing neighborhoods. Because the unit is contained within the existing primary dwelling or attached to it, the additional unit doesn't disrupt or draw attention to, although it is important to note that parking on site would need to be considered. It's a form of what is often referred to in the development and planning community as gentle density or low impact density, as it doesn't disrupt the general character, visual character of an existing neighborhood. These suites can also provide affordable rental options and can generate additional income for homeowners, assisting with mortgage affordability. They provide renters with an opportunity to live in lower density residential neighborhoods, which usually have strong access to schools and community amenities, but typically have little conventional rental housing versus home ownership options. There are also multiple funding incentives from the federal and provincial government currently that property owners can apply to and receive funding to specifically establish a secondary suite in their home. Now I'll walk through some policy that's relevant to this application and the amendments being considered. Under the municipal planning strategy, there are a number of visions that work to guide policy and further land use bylaw direction, and one of these visions is settlement. So the priorities under settlement really seek to concentrate new residential development in the growth centers across the municipality, which have defined boundaries, and to encourage efficient municipal service and infrastructure delivery. It is relevant and important to note that all the R1 zones exist only within growth center boundaries across the municipality, and the zone has only been applied to areas that are existing subdivisions, which are established neighborhoods. The proposed amendment would result in a potential housing increase in these pre-established residential zones. All other primarily low-density, single-family dwelling residential neighborhoods are zoned residential 1 and 2 unit, so our R2 zone, and this zone already permits 4 units as of right. When we're discussing the residential 1 unit R1 zone specifically, we can also look at section 3.1, the residential designation in our municipal planning strategy for some further policy context. So housing development approaches differ between growth centers and rural areas, particularly in land use, scope, and scale of development. In alignment with the settlement priorities, most new housing is directed to growth centers to really maximize existing infrastructure and municipal services and to align with established community patterns. The general residential policy has zone placement policies that further establish the residential 1 unit R1 zone in the land use bylaw. Policy 3.1.2 lists that all zones that are enabled within the residential designation, one of these being the R1 zone, the policy states that lands located in these zones are intended to maintain existing residential areas while encouraging energy efficiency and providing opportunities for infill development primarily on roads located on the periphery of growth centers. These zones, being zones 1, R1, and R2, are intended to consist of primarily 1 and 2 unit dwellings. We take a look at what policies in our municipal planning strategy enable these applications to occur. We can take a look at policy 5.3.2, our enabling policy, that lists that council shall amend the text of the land use bylaw provided the amendment is consistent with the vision, goals, and objectives of the strategy. So further in the staff review, we'll compare this application against our vision, goals, objectives, and ensure that it remains consistent with our MPS. And additionally, as this is a council-initiated amendment, through the Municipal Government Act of Nova Scotia, the MGA, Council has the power to provide direction on the administration of plans and policies of the municipality to the Chief Administrative Officer, or the CAO, who is thus able to direct staff in the actioning of plans and policies. As I wrap up my presentation, as a reminder, here is an overview of the land use bylaw amendment process. So we're currently at the public information meeting stage, after which will be followed by a fulsome staff review and the preparation of a presentation and report for the Planning Advisory Committee. The Planning Advisory Committee will then make a recommendation to Council, and again, regardless of what type of recommendation is given to Council, it will proceed to a first reading, followed by a public hearing, followed by a second hearing, at which point in time a decision on the application will be made by Council, and the 14-day appeal period will begin. Concludes my presentation for this application. If there are any concerns or questions, please feel free to reach out to me at 902-690-2452 between the hours of 8:30 and 4:30, Monday to Friday, or reach out to me via email at mmeldrum@countyofkings.ca, and I will do my best to get back to you as quickly as possible.